So today we are reading the 9th lesson of 14 lessons in yogi philosophy and Oriental occultism. Psychic influence. One of the things which have puzzled scientific investigators and students of the history of mankind is the persistent recurrence of stories, legends, and traditions relating to the possession and practice of some form of psychic influence by men of all races and in all ages. The investigators have found it easy to dismiss the more primitive forms of these stories by the explanation that they were merely the result of the crudest form of superstition among the uneducated and underdeveloped people. But as they turned over the pages of history, they found that the idle superstition still maintained its original force, and that its forms increased in number and variety. From the repulsive voodoo practices of the African savage, one may trace a straight line to the witchcraft epidemic in New England, and thence on to the present time when the Western world has apparently gone wild on psychism. And the daily papers are filled with the sensational tales of mesmeric influence, hypnotism, personal magnetism, etc. The books of all ages are filled with tales of psychic influence, the Bible containing a number of instances of its practice for good or evil. At the present time, attention is often called to the wonderful instances of the power of the mind, personal magnetism, etc. And it is not quite common to hear the expression that one has or has not personal magnetism, is or is not magnetic. Much nonsense has been written on this subject, and some of the wildest assertions and theories regarding it have been advanced. And yet the truth itself is far more wonderful than are the wildest fictions which have been written and taught regarding it. Underlying all the popular notions and misconceptions regarding psychic influence lies a solid basis of fact, the greater portion of which is undreamt of even by many of those who have been feeding the public taste for sensationalism. We need scarcely tell our students that the Orientals have known and practiced for centuries past all known forms of occultism, and in fact have possessed the secrets which the investigators of the West have been striving so laboriously to uncover. Scraps of the knowledge have filtered through and have been eagerly seized upon by Western writers and used as the basis for startling claims and theories. And much of this hidden knowledge will and must remain hidden for years to come because of the undeveloped state of the race and the general unfitness of people for this secret wisdom. To spread before the general public even a small part of certain of the hidden teachings at this time would be dangerous indeed, and would bring upon the race one of the greatest curses known to man. This not because of any wrong in the teachings themselves, but because the selfishness of the average man or woman is such that they would soon begin to use this knowledge for their own personal profit and ends, to the detriment and hurt of their fellow men. This would avail them nothing if the entire race knew enough of the subject, had advanced far enough intellectually and spiritually to grasp and comprehend these teachings, and thus be able to protect themselves from the selfish attempts of their unscrupulous brothers and sisters. For, as all occultists know, no black magic can affect the man or woman who knows his or her real place in nature. His or her real power is to resist the practices of those who have acquired bits of occult knowledge without the spiritual growth which would teach them how to use the same properly. But the average person of today does not know and will not be convinced of his own power, and therefore is unable to protect himself from the psychic attempts of even those who have grasped some fragments of occult teachings and are using them for selfish ends. The improper use of psychic power has long been known to occultists as black magic, which, so far from being a remnant of the superstition of the Middle Ages, is a very real thing and is being practiced today to a great extent. Those so practicing it are sowing the seeds of their own punishment, and every bit of psychic force expanded for base and selfish ends will unquestionably rebound and react upon the user. But nevertheless, these people are influencing others that they may reap some material gain or pleasure, and the public is being more or less imposed upon by such people. Although it laughs at the idea, considers the matter a joke, and regards those who teach the truth as wild visionaries or mentally weak. Very fortunately, those who would so prostitute psychic powers know comparatively little regarding the subject and can use only the simpler forms. But when they come in contact with those entirely ignorant of the subject, they are able to accomplish more or less by their arts. Many men find, sometimes by accident, that they can influence others to use their bidding, and not knowing the source of their power, often use it just as they would any physical power or mental strength. Such people, however, usually have gradually brought to their knowledge, in pursuance with well-established occult laws, something which will lead them to a better understanding of the subject, and they begin to see their mistake. Others pick up a little bit of occult teaching and just try it on others, and seeing the effect, start on the road to black magic, although scarcely knowing what they are doing. These people also are warned in certain ways and given every chance to rectify their error. Others seem to understand something of the risk they are running, but willing to take it, being fascinated by their new sense of power and blinded by it. None of these people are allowed to go very far with their selfish work, as there are certain influences at work to counteract their efforts. And a little good always counteracts a great deal of the selfish psychic work, this being an old occult truth. But outside of this bit of elementary black magic, of which we have spoken more in a way of a warning and a caution, many people are endowed with faculties which make them powers among their fellow men and women, and their influence is felt in everyday life. Just as the influence of the physically strong man is felt in a crowd of weaker people. It needs but a moment's glance at one's acquaintances to show that some of them have a greater influence than have others. Some are naturally looked to as leaders and teachers, while others naturally fall in place as followers. These strong, positive men come to the front in warfare, business life, the bar, the pulpit, and in practices of medicine, and in fact, in all walks of life and all branches of human endeavor. We notice this fact and speak of this man being possessed of a great deal of personal magnetism, or of that one lacking it. But what do we mean by personal magnetism? Can anyone give an intelligent answer? Many are the theories which have been advanced to account for this phenomenon, and many are the plans advanced to develop this power. Of late years, many teachers have sprung up, claiming to have discovered the secret and offering to teach it to all comers at so many dollars a head. Many sensational announcements having been made to attract purchasers of courses of instruction, and many appeals to the most selfish motives have been made in order to awaken an interest in what is offered for sale. In the majority of cases, these teachers have practically nothing to offer and teach, while in some few cases, they have worked out of a sufficient knowledge of the subject to be able to give directions whereby one may possess himself of a sufficient degree of psychic power to gain a certain amount of influence over the ignorant and weak of the race. But fortunately, the majority of these purchasers of these teachings have not sufficient confidence in themselves or in the teachings to put into practice even the comparatively meager teachings given them. But at last, a few have sufficient self-confidence to put these plans into practice and are able to do considerable harm by their ignorant and selfish use of power, which are intended for high uses. All these things must pass away as the race advances in knowledge and understanding of the occult truths. And in the meantime, those who really understand the subject are doing what they can to educate the race and its principles, that they may protect themselves psychically and may not be tempted to make a selfish use of the higher powers. The man or woman of spiritual growth and development can afford to smile at the efforts of these dabblers in black magic, at least so far as the fear of any personal injury to or effect upon themselves is concerned. Such a one rises to a higher plane to which the efforts of the selfish occultists cannot penetrate. We will have something to say on this subject of self-protection toward the end of this lesson, after we have given the student a general idea of the several forms of psychic influence in general use. We wish to be distinctly understood, however, when we say that no attempt will be made in this lesson to uncover a degree of occult knowledge which might place in the hands of the chance reader a weapon to use for his own selfish ends. This is a lesson designed for self-protection of those who read it, not for the advancement of a knowledge of black magic, even in its elementary forms. And let us caution those who read what we will write on this subject that we are serious in what we are saying regarding the selfish use of occult knowledge. If they knew but a fragment of the trouble which one may bring upon himself by improper and occult practices, they would drop the subject as quickly as they would a venomous serpent, which was beginning to warm into life from the heat of their hands. Occult powers are for the proper use and protection of mankind, not for misuse or abuse. And like playing with wires of a dynamo, meddling with these powers is apt to prove unpleasant to the person who will not heed the warning. Although many Western writers deny it, all true occultists know that all forms of psychic influence, including what is called personal magnetism, mesmerism, hypnotism, suggestion, etc., are but different manifestations of the same thing. What this thing is may be readily imagined by those who have followed us in our preceding lesson. It is the power of the mind of the individual operated along the lines mentioned in our preceding lessons. We trust that the student has acquainted himself with what we have said regarding the instinctive mind, thought dynamics, telepathy, thought forms, etc., as well as the potency of prana, that he may understand this lesson without too much repetition. Psychic influence, and by this we mean all forms of it. What does it mean? Of what does it consist? How is it called into operation? What is its effect? Let us try and answer these questions. We must begin with the instinctive mind, one of the 7 principles of man. We told you in lesson 2 that this is a plane of mentation shared in common with us by the lower animals, at least in its lowest forms. It is the first form of mentation reached in the scale of evolution and in its lowest stages manifests entirely along subconscious lines. Its beginnings are seen as far back as the mineral life manifesting here in the formation of crystals, etc. In the lower forms of plant life, it shows but feebly and is scarcely a degree above that manifested by the mineral. Then, by easy and progressive stages, it grows more distinct and higher in scale in plant life, until in some of the higher forms of plants, it even manifests a rudimentary form of consciousness. In the kingdom of the lower animals, the instinctive mind is seen in various stages, from the almost plant-like intelligence of the lowest form of animal life to the almost human intelligence of some of the higher animals. Then, in the lower forms of human life, we find it scarcely removed from the highest forms shown in the lower animals. And as we ascend in the scale, we find it becoming shaded, colored, and influenced by the 5th principle, the intellect, until we reach the highest form of man known to us at this time, where we see the intellect in control, asserting its proper position and influencing the the lower principle only for good, and avoiding the mistakes of the less developed man who pours harmful auto-suggestions into the instinctive mind and works actual harm to himself. I think that might have been the longest sentence I've ever read. In this condition of the instinctive mind, we must pass over its wonderful work in superintending the work of the physical body, and also some of its other manifestations, and must confine ourselves to the subject of the part of the instinctive mind plays in the matter of psychic influence. A most important part, by the way, as without the instinctive mind, there could be no operation of psychic influence, as there would be nothing to be acted upon. The instinctive mind is the instrument played upon by psychic influence. We speak often as if one's intellect were influenced in this way, but this is incorrect, for the person is influenced in spite of his intellect, not by means of it. The influence is so strongly impressed upon the instinctive mind that it runs away heedless of the protest of the intellect. As many persons afterwards recollect to their sorrow, many of the persons who, in their own words, knew better all the time, but did it just the same. We will start with what is known as suggestion, and which really lies at the bottom of all forms of psychic influence, personal or absent. By suggestion, we mean the influencing or control of the thoughts and actions of another by means of a positive command, or a subtle insinuation of the desired thought, or any combination of the two, or anything that may come between these two extremes. Personal suggestion is quite common in everyday life. In fact, we are constantly giving and taking suggestions, consciously and unconsciously, and one can scarcely get away from the giving and taking so long as he associates with other persons, hears their voices, or read what others have written or printed. But these everyday suggestions are relatively unimportant and lack the force of a conscious and deliberate suggestion by one who understands the art of suggesting. Let us first see how and why the suggestions are received and acted upon. As we have said, in the early forms of life, the instinctive mind worked on alone, uninfluenced by intellect, for intellect had not yet unfolded or developed, totally unconscious, as in plant life. As the scale of evolution was mounted, the animal began to become dimly conscious and commenced to be aware of things, and to perform a something like primitive reasoning about them. In order to protect itself from its enemies, the animal had to be guided by the rudimentary consciousness which was beginning to unfold and which manifested in and through the instinctive mind. Some animals progressed more rapidly than others of their kind and naturally began to assert themselves and their peculiar power. They found themselves doing the thinking for their fellows. They came to be recognized as being the ones to look to in cases of danger, or when food became scarce, or their leading was generally recognized and followed. Leaders sprang up in flocks and herds, and not alone, as had been commonly taught in the textbooks, because of their brute strength, but also because of their superior brain power, which may be described as cunning. The cunning animal was quick to recognize danger and to take means to avoid it, quick to discover new ways to gain food and overcome the common enemy or the prey. Anyone who has been much around domestic animals, or who has studied the ways of the wild animals who flock together, will realize exactly what we mean. The few led and directed, and the many blind followed and were led. And as the development went on, and man was evolved, the same thing manifested itself. Leaders sprang into prominence and were obeyed. And all along the history of the race up until the present time, this same state of affairs exists. A few lead and the many follow. Man is an obedient and imitative animal. The great majority of people are like sheep. Give them a bellwether, and they will gladly follow the tinkle of the bell. But mark this fact. It is a most important one. It is not always the man or woman of the greatest amount of what we call intellectual attainment, education, or book learning who is the leader of men. On the contrary, many of such people are often the most confirmed followers of leaders. The man or woman who leads is the one who feels within himself or herself that something which may be called a consciousness of power, an awareness of the real source of strength and power behind them and in them. This awareness may not be recognized by the intellect. It may not be understood, but the individual feels somehow that he is possessed of power and force, or is in contact with power and force which he may use. And speaking of the ordinary man, he consequently gives himself a personal credit for it and begins to use his power. He feels the reality of the word I. He feels himself as an individual, a real thing, an entity, and he instinctively proceeds to assert himself. These people, as a rule, do not understand the source of their power, but it is a matter of feeling with them, and they naturally make use of the power. They influence others without understanding just how, and often wonder how it all comes out. And how does it come about? Let us see. We'll pause here and we will pick this up tomorrow. Monday. If anybody has anything to share, no pressure. If not, we'll move on to breath and begin our meditation. All right. Making some water. All right, let's do some breath work. So we'll do alternate nostril breathing. We'll start with our nostril breathing. Breathing in and out through the nose. Creating that strong, straight spine, whether you're sitting up or laying on your back. And if you need to, another option is to bring your back to a wall so you have some support behind you if you're working on building the stamina to hold the body while you're sitting for a while or sitting in a chair. But don't lean against the back and have your feet firmly planted on the floor. So just notice what you're doing with the arms, what you're doing with the palms. Inhaling deeply as you inhale, filling up the low belly, and then exhale, letting all the air out. You can keep the eyes open or gently closed. And bring your right hand over to the nose. Close the right nostril with the thumb. Inhale through the left. Close the left with the ring finger. Oh, I messed up. I gotta do it over. Close the right with the thumb. Inhale through the left. Close the left with the ring finger. Exhale right. Inhale right. Close right. Exhale left. Inhale left. Close left. Exhale right. Inhale right. Close right. Exhale left. Inhale left. Close left. Exhale right. Inhale right. Close right. Exhale left. Inhale left. Close left. Exhale right. Inhale right. Close right. Exhale left. Inhale left. close left, exhale right, inhale right, close right, exhale left. You can continue on with that breath if you want to join me through a few rounds of Bumblebee Breath. You'll close the ears with the thumbs and you'll put your peace fingers over your two eyes. And you'll inhale and exhale with the lips sealed. And as you exhale, you're going to create a humming sound at the back of the throat. It will create a humming sound like a bumblebee and vibrations in the body. And you'll do 3 to 5 rounds. You'll take a deep breath in and you'll exhale as long as you can. And you'll just do a rolling basis. You don't have to wait for me. On your next inhale, you'll inhale and then you'll create that humming sound. So if you're joining me, you'll inhale. As you settle into your meditation, just checking in with the body. Notice if it's comfortable. Maybe it needs some movement first. You could do some cat cows, some stretching. Maybe you need to do some sun salutations or roll out the neck. And then choosing your shape that you'll get comfy in, whether you're seated or legs at the wall or over a bolster or heart bench, whatever feels good for you this morning. Another option is, this is a Kapha Mudra. So if you're feeling really lazy and tired and low energy, you can fold your ring finger into your palm and you'll take your thumb and place it on the space between those two knuckles. And it can help create energy. But if you're doing this and you're going to sit for 20 minutes, you may want to do it toward the end of meditation. Otherwise, you're going to create energy and then you're not going to want to sit, which is sometimes what happens to me. So I'm going to go ahead and set the timer. And if you need to drop early, have a good day and weekend. Bringing hands together in front of heart. Namaste. Have a beautiful day and weekend, everybody. See you Monday.